I remember the look on my father's face that day like it was etched into my soul, disgust twisted into disbelief, a silent accusation that I had wasted my life chasing a ridiculous dream. They called me a fool, a failure, the embarrassment of the family. My mother's eyes welled with tears, not of pride, but of shame. The dinner table was heavy with their silent judgments, and I could feel their contempt like a weight pressing down on my chest. That night, I made a decision. No more listening to their mockery. No more hiding behind their doubts. I packed my bags and left that cursed town, determined to prove them wrong, to carve my own path out of the chaos they had tried to drown me in. I wasn't going to be the disappointment they expected. I was going to be something real. I started from nothing. My tiny apartment was a bleak, cluttered space filled with canvases, code snippets, and dreams that seemed impossible. I poured everything into becoming a painter, then a game developer, then an entrepreneur. Each failure a brutal reminder of how much I had to prove. I worked nights, slept little, and bled my passion onto every project. The world didn't see me. They laughed at my ambitions, but I kept going. Years blurred into a relentless grind. There were moments I almost gave up, when rejection letters piled up, when my savings dwindled to nothing. When I questioned whether I was just chasing an illusion. But then something changed. My work caught fire online. My games went viral. My art was featured in galleries. The critics, the skeptics, they couldn't ignore me anymore. I had built something real, something that stood on its own. And now I was ready to come home, not to seek approval, but to show them what I'd become. I returned not as the broken kid they mocked, but as a man forged in fire, standing tall on the foundation of my relentless pursuit. The day I walked through those familiar streets, everything felt distant, yet sharply vivid. I could hear their voices echoing in my mind. How I'd be a disgrace, how I'd fail, how my ridiculous dreams were a joke. But I was different now. I carried the weight of my journey, and it made me stronger. I knocked on the door of my childhood home. My father opened it first, his eyes narrowing as if expecting to see the same defeated kid he once knew. But when he saw me, leaner, confident, carrying a deck of awards and a portfolio of my work, his jaw tightened and his eyes widened with disbelief. My mother's hands trembled as she looked at what I had built, an empire of my own making. She opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. "I told you I'd make something of myself," I said, voice steady but filled with emotion. "I told you I'd prove everyone wrong. I did it, not despite your doubts, but because I refused to let them define me." The room was silent. Her eyes shimmered with tears. I knew weren't just for pride. They were for guilt, for regret, for realizing they'd underestimated me all along. My father looked at me, the old skepticism fading into something harder to read. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You've done well," he said quietly. "I was wrong." I didn't need their praise, but hearing those words, true and unreserved, felt like a victory I'd fought for years to claim. In that moment, I understood the true power of resilience. My journey wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above their doubts, transform pain into purpose, and forge a legacy that no one could ever dismiss. I turned to leave, but I paused at the door. I looked back at my family, at the people who once mocked me and doubted me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. A flicker of respect, a glimmer of understanding. I had returned as someone they could no longer ignore. And I knew, deep in my bones, that I had finally won, not just in their eyes, but in my own. I had become the person I always knew I could be, and that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.